Week 1 was a wild week for fantasy football, as it always is every single year. And obviously, when you're looking at it, there was a lot of duds at the tight end position in specific. You had Hunter Henry finishing as the tight end 1 in week 1. And this is to be expected with tight ends, which is what makes these types of videos so important week to week in fantasy football, is going through the top tight end options this week. So we got to continue the week 2 fantasy football preparation process today, as we are going to go through the top 12 tight end rankings for fantasy football in week 2. Now, since there are still some issues with injuries to guys like Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews, there are going to be 2 more additional bonus tight end options in this video. So we're going to go ahead and get right into tier 1. We've got Travis Kelce at the Jacksonville Jaguars this week. Simply put, if Travis Kelce plays, he immediately shoots up to number 1, and I did not want to put him at number 1, because the reality is, if he plays, he's probably going to be at like 80%, 85%. I didn't want to put him as the tight end 1. But week 1 fantasy football showed us the tight end position needs Travis Kelce. They need him. Like I said, the tight end 1 in week 1 was Hunter Henry with 5 catches and 56 yards. That's a crazy reality we're living in. So if Travis Kelce is at 50%, he's still the number 1 target and the number 1 tight end in fantasy football. Number 2, I've got Darren Waller having the bounce back game against the Arizona Cardinals in Arizona this week. I know the New York Giants sucked on Sunday night. I know that's a bad taste in your mouth, and it's hard to get that taste out of your mouth. I am totally aware of all this stuff. It was a terrible game for every New York Giant. But what you need to take solace in is knowing that Darren Waller had 5 targets in that game. Obviously, there wasn't much to work with here, but he looked like the New York Giants' number 1 option in this offense right here. They're going to get a huge break taking on the Arizona Cardinals this week. It's going to be a massive situation for Darren Waller and for the Giants as a whole. They're going to get a huge break in schedule right here. Waller is in line for a bounce back week this week. Number 3, rounding out tier 1, is Mark Andrews taking on the Cincinnati Bengals in Cincinnati. Very similar to Travis Kelce. If Mark Andrews plays, he's an automatic top 3 tight end in fantasy football. And there's really not much else to go over here, so we won't waste your time talking a bunch of nonsense about why Mark Andrews is going to be number 3 on this list. He deserves to be number 3 as long as he is playing in a game. Number 4, TJ Hockenson taking on the Philadelphia Eagles in Philadelphia this week. Now, when you look at TJ Hockenson in week 1, obviously he wasn't the tight end 1. He wasn't the tight end 2. Wasn't the tight end 3. But he was just fine in week 1. He had 7.5 fantasy points. But the important piece here is noticing the target totals. He had 8 targets in week 1. That's a big, big number. And of course, the targets are the huge metric we are looking at in fantasy football, especially when it comes to the tight end position, which is super desperate. We are all very desperate to get any kind of tight end points that we can. Minnesota knows how good this guy can be. That shows with their commitment to him as an offensive weapon in this offense, and it shows with the contract that they signed him. They know that TJ Hockenson is great when they give him opportunities. So I expect a more efficient week this week for TJ Hockenson against the Philadelphia Eagles. Number 5, I've got Evan Ingram taking on the Kansas City Chiefs in Jacksonville this week. Evan Ingram gets the great matchup right here. And it's not that Evan Ingram is ever a bad option at tight end in fantasy football, but the matchup here sets him apart. The matchup is tremendous here. He's always a very good tight end option in Jacksonville. The matchup, though, is tremendous. High-flying offense with great weekly upside, and Jacksonville is going to need to put up points to win this game. There's no question that they need points in this game to win. So Evan Ingram, honestly, I think is a very good threat to score a touchdown here in week 1. Everybody on this offense has touchdown potential week to week, and I think that Evan Ingram certainly has it in week 2. George Kittle is number 6, taking on the Los Angeles Rams in Los Angeles this week. Now, when you look at George Kittle's week in week 1, it wasn't a great week, especially when you put that next to everybody else in San Francisco, when you had guys like Christian McCaffrey for 24 points, Brandon Ayuk going off, Deebo Samuel having a decent game. George Kittle's week was definitely very, very underwhelming. They didn't really need him, though. That's the thing, is they didn't really need George Kittle in this game. They figured this guy's not even at 100% health, so why risk him when we're killing the Pittsburgh Steelers and embarrassing them on their own field? They figured, why even do it? He still had 6 targets in week 1, though. So that shows you that George Kittle was enough to handle a decently healthy workload as a tight end option. And there's going to be good weeks and bad weeks for George Kittle. That's the reality of George Kittle in fantasy football. He's that type of guy. He's very similar to a guy like Mike Williams at the wide receiver position. Now, the difference here is, of course, the positional value. When you're getting George Kittle in the 4th, 5th, 6th round of your drafts, you can't put George Kittle on your bench if he is playing. And that's why he's here at number 6, because he can win weeks when he is on. If he gets a 20, 25, 30-point game, you don't want that on your bench. And that's exactly why I think that things are going to be more efficient for him in week 2, because he's got a matchup here where I think that it's going to be more competitive, and San Francisco is going to need to feed him more to keep themselves atop of this game. Moving on to number 7, I've got Dallas Goedert of the Philadelphia Eagles taking on the Minnesota Vikings at home on Thursday night right here. One of the many goose eggs of the week was Dallas Goedert. You had guys like T. Higgins, you had Drake London's goose game, and then you had Dallas Goedert. It's a bad week for Dallas Goedert in this particular week. All week, though, I had been saying leading up to the week, this is going to be a very tough matchup for the Philadelphia Eagles as an offense. And it was exactly that. There's a lot of lower scoring games for fantasy football options on the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, I'll be honest. I did not expect Dallas Goedert to goose egg in this game. I was not expecting that. But much like George Kittle, you're not putting Dallas Goedert on your bench. That's just not what you're going to do. You drafted him too high, and his upside is too high for that type of behavior, especially in week 2 with a top-tier matchup versus the Tennessee Titans on Monday night, who cannot defend a pass. He's going to bounce back in week 2. Moving on to number 8, I've got Pat Freiermuth taking on the Cleveland Browns on Monday night in Pittsburgh this week. So much like a couple of the other tight ends in week 1, Pat Freiermuth's touchdown that he scored, it totally saved his week. Like, literally, he was nothing without that touchdown. 1 reception, 3 yards, 1 touchdown. That was Pat Freiermuth's week this week. So really, there's a situation here with Pat Freiermuth that says, well, yeah, last week was bad, but we also need to remember that Deontay Johnson is probably going to miss time. He went down in the middle of that game with a hamstring injury, and it didn't look like a good one either. Deontay Johnson is probably going to miss time, and that's going to push Pat Freiermuth up in the target totals in this offense. Pat Freiermuth is about to be more important than he already was in this offense, and they got embarrassed in week 1. I think they're going to come out and show a better effort in week 2. Moving down to number 9, I've got Hayden Hurst taking on the New Orleans Saints of the Carolina Panthers this week. And honestly, this one's pretty funny to me, really, because I got a couple of questions, actually quite a few questions about Hayden Hurst leading up to week 1. And I consistently said, I don't think that Hayden Hurst is a real top tight end option in week 1. Not only was I wrong, but honestly, I should have known better. I really should have known better in this situation. Carolina does not have a clear wide receiver 1. They've got Adam Thielen, DJ Chark is out. They've got Jonathan Mingo, Terrace Marshall. I mean, this offense has no clear answer at wide receiver 1. Their top target is Hayden Hurst. He's a veteran player. He still is a pretty good player, and he's going to continue to provide consistent upside, I think, for a quarterback who is very young and is dealing with a very unstable situation on his team. So I think that Hayden Hurst is actually going to be a relatively safe option moving forward in fantasy football at the tight end position. Moving down to number 10, I've got David Njoku taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers in Pittsburgh this week. So also, if you look at David Njoku in week 1, he was a disappearing act in week 1 as well. He was very, very disappointing. I mean, 3 targets, 2 receptions, 24 yards, 3.4 fantasy points in half PPR. No type of week to be proud of when you're starting David Njoku, and especially when someone else tells you to start David Njoku like I did. But again, much like it is for Amari Cooper, I think this could be the perfect remedy for a guy like David Njoku this week. This guy is facing a Pittsburgh Steelers defense that is really not a good defense. They are not good at defending the pass. So with the better matchup in week 2, I think that I expect Njoku to have the bounce back week because I'll take the matchup any day here. Moving on to number 11, I've got Kyle Pitts taking on the Green Bay Packers in Atlanta this week. Also, this one is very funny to me as well. Funny and also a little bit sad because Pitts is obviously one of the more talented tight ends on this list, if not the most talented tight end on the entire list right here. But much like Drake London, I cannot rank Kyle Pitts high. I just cannot do it. This team does not have the passing volume. They threw 18 total passes in week 1. 18. That is so low. And the reason they did that was very, very purposeful. They have a very dominant run game with a run blocking offensive line. That is Atlanta's reality here. Now, what I'll say about Kyle Pitts is obviously due to positional value, Kyle Pitts is still going to be on this list most weeks because he's very efficient with the work that he gets. In week 1, 3 targets, 2 receptions, 44 yards. So in this particular week against the Green Bay Packers, I'm actually totally fine with banking on another efficient day from Kyle Pitts with the potential to get a big boom play. Moving on to number 12, I've got Cole Kmet taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in Tampa Bay this week. Now, as disappointing of an offense as Chicago was in week 1, the one thing that I saw that was encouraging was that this team did show their commitment to getting Cole Kmet involved and having him be a very important piece of this offense. They were very committed to that plan. He had 7 targets in week 1, 5 receptions for 44 yards. So not a superstar week at all, but 7 targets is a good number to get at the tight end position in specific. And obviously with the Cole Kmet contract that he signed over the offseason, the team knows that he is important to the offense and they will continue to use him as so. So he's going to continue to be a very big part of this offense. I think he's going to be fine in fantasy football for the majority of the season. And then our 2 bonus guys right here, if Mark Andrews or Travis Kelce or even both of them do not go, we've got Sam Laporta and we've got Adam Troutman. Sam Laporta of the Detroit Lions taking on the Seattle Seahawks. I know I don't usually like rookie tight ends. I'm not usually big on that, but he was very much involved in this offensive game plan against the Kansas City Chiefs, and he's got an easier matchup this week against Seattle. I think he's a fine dart throw at the tight end position if one of your other guys is down. Adam Troutman as well, I think he's going to be a decent option as well. The guy was important to the offense in week 1, and Greg Dulcich is now down and he is out. He's got a leg injury, don't know the specification yet, but Greg Dulcich could miss some legitimate time here. Taking on the Washington Commanders, I think Adam Troutman is a pretty good option in week 2 as well. So let me know what you think of the rankings in the comments below and what tight ends you are actively trying to pick up on the waiver wire or start this week. And if you want to see the top 30 wide receivers in week 2 fantasy football, click on this video right here.